Hi, I'm Tribune Arts and Entertainment Editor Aarik Danielsen, and I'm here with David Wilson from the True False Film Fest. Of course, True False is right around the corner, March 1st through 4th. Folks are already making film reservations, frantically trying to figure out their schedule, see how much they can cram into one weekend. And so I thought we'd just spend a little time with David, ask him a few things about this year's festival. And I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you is just, as you guys kind of look at the lineup writ large, any kind of common threads or common themes that stand out to you, whether it be stylistically or, substance-wise?
Yeah, I mean, it's always one of those things where I don't see this necessarily until I step back from the whole and kind of look at it. We have our most international program ever. Not only do we have films from all over the world, there are 4 countries we've never shown films from before, Bhutan, Uruguay, Congo. It's interesting with docs because often you have films set in a country, but not necessarily made by someone from that country.
Yeah.
This year's True Vision honoree, Deude Humari, is a Congolese filmmaker. He's the first Congolese filmmaker who'll be represented at True False. And I think looking at his work is really interesting because it is the work of someone from the Congo.
Yeah.
There's a great kind of pair of films, like a double feature, if you will, this year. Makala, which is set in the Congo, but by a French director, and Kinshasa Makambo. Incredibly stylistically different, incredible different goals, both great films, but I think really interesting to look at as 2 very different visions of the Congo.
Yeah.
I've also seen, and this is always the case, but I think it's pretty heightened this year, there's really like a whole chunk of films which are actively engaged and pushing at that fiction, nonfiction boundary.
Yeah, of course.
And this is everything from Robert Greene's film Bisbee 17 to American Animals and The Writer, which are both fiction films.
Okay.
I mean, when these films come out in the world, and at every other festival, they will be talked about as a fiction film.
Okay.
We think they're in dialogue with nonfiction. We
Yeah.
think they have all these nonfiction elements, and especially American Animals is the director of The Imposter,
right.
a former True False film, and a film that was really working on kind of the boundaries of like how sort of like stylish and carefully sort of set pieces can you bring into nonfiction filmmaking, and here he sort of just crossed over fully.
Yeah.
And he said, well, what if I give the people in these recreations lines, like make them actors, so that's cool. I think those films, Gabriel in the Mountain is a sort of more low-key but also really interesting version of working with actors as well as real people to tell a story. And then, for the folks who are out there more and maybe like diving into the experimental end, I think there's this really fascinating question about sort of documents versus documentaries.
Okay.
And I would say for years, and still this year, we have really celebrated narrative filmmaking. We've celebrated taking the messy events of real life and shaping them into stories with arcs and characters and beginnings and middles and ends. And this year, I think, in some ways, especially at our more experimental edges, we're pushing back against that a little bit. We're looking at work, like Combat Obscura, which was shot by a Marine videographer. It is certainly crafted into a movie, don't get me wrong, but it's a really raw portrait. That footage still feels like it just came out of the camera and is being presented to you. Same with The Shakedown, this totally out there look, the underground black lesbian club scene in LA in the 90s and early 2000s. This is home video grade footage. It's footage from 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's got a kind of grainy, dark, degraded look to it. And yet it captures a world and environment that almost none of us ever got to be part of.
Yeah, sure.
So I think there's a really cool way of looking at the world, how do we shape stories and how do we sometimes just let stories exist.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and one of the films that you've already mentioned is Robert Greene's Bisbee 17, which for folks who don't know, he was already a filmmaker, had shown films at True False, is now a professor at Mizzou in the Doc Journalism Center, and this is his 5th film at True False. And I know you guys...
the all-time record holder.
Yeah, which is crazy. And I know you guys well enough to know that Robert Greene doesn't just get to make a film and put his name on it and it automatically gets into True False. Like, you guys are going to...
Oh, no, we're actively looking for reasons to turn down
to reject his
film.
Yeah, I'm sure at this point.
I'm dying to reject his films.
Yeah.
No, he's a great filmmaker.
Yeah, what is it that hits you with this film?
Robert is someone, and part of the reason he's here in Columbia, and that we've shown his films, is because he's so invested in exploring where can documentary form go, how can we use different conventions to tell stories. And this, I think, is his most accessible film to date. And, you know, it really is about saying, look, here's this 100-year-old, you know, labor history story of a mining company, you know, expelling workers from a town. How does a town deal with that 100 years down the road?
Yeah.
So a lot of ways to tell that story. There's probably like a very dry, classical, you know, I'll say PBS, even though I think PBS has now moved on from this.
Sure.
But, you know, there's that dry, classical way of sort of telling this historical documentary. And this film is anything but that. This film really, Robert is trying all kinds of stuff. He's casting actors, he makes part of it a musical, he's doing these recreations, and having the townspeople themselves build sets for his recreations, which in turn gets them thinking and talking about their own histories. I mean, it is a multi-layered look at this town and its history, and it works. It's entertaining, and it's fun to watch, and it tells us a lot more, I think, than that dry, dusty historical doc.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, David, I'm always curious, and I think I've asked you this year after year, but for folks who might be new to Columbia or they've never been to True False and they feel like, I don't really know what this is about, this has been going on for a long time, like I'm not sure what my point of entry is. Are there any films this year, I know everybody likes different things and everybody likes different subjects, but any films this year that you feel like are really good, like first True False films?
You know, you have a cold, dead heart if you do not love Won't You Be My Neighbor. This is a documentary. It's about Mr. Rogers, about Fred Rogers. It's made by a guy named Morgan Neville, who True False fans will know as the guy behind 20 Feet from Stardom, Best of Enemies, Music of Strangers. I will tell you right now, spoiler, it is not going to dig up some dark secret history of Fred
That's good.
Rogers.
This is, nobody wants that.
But it does put him in this cultural context, and this cultural, over time, show how he at times led, at times responded to the cultural changes that were happening in America. I think it's absolutely a movie for our moment right now, and yet it's also a history of a really, truly beautiful human being.
Yeah.
It's a great movie, and I really think a lot of people are going to respond to it.
Cool. Yeah, that's good. Nobody wants the like secret plot twist with Mr. Rogers.
No,
that's
it's not
what
there.
the movie is. Yeah. You know, I know that you're a big music guy, and True False always has really interesting music lineup. What are some of the folks that you're excited to hear this year? They're going to be either busking or doing showcases.
Yeah, they're, you know, every year we bring in all these musicians. They play before films, they play showcases, they play on the street sometimes. We've got another brass band coming back from New Orleans, which always sort of warms my heart and makes me happy. You know, also folks like Damn Funk is a really well-known music producer, DJ. He's going to be doing a big show at the Blue Note. And then kind of in that True False vein a little bit, I think if you look at our lineup this year, I think it'd be hard to say like, oh, this is this kind of music. Years ago, we got accused of having, you know, every band had like a washboard and a, you know, a stand-up bass.
Sure, right.
And now I think we've expanded beyond that a bit.
Yeah.
But someone like Esme Patterson,
of course,
it was a band called Paper Birds, and it's sort of out on her own now. Really, really beautiful musician. And you know, the people I've had emails from like 3 filmmakers who are excited about Mary Lattimore.
Oh yeah.
She's making a name for herself.
Yeah. Harpist, composer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a really varied lineup, and I'm excited. And I'll mention one local band who caught my eye. This is a high school band called The Adaptation.
Okay, cool.
They're kind of doing every band I read about now. I feel like, you know, I read is like doing like, you know, a '90s throwback thing.
Right.
That's where it's at right now. But I feel like they've got a great sound. They've got kind of like that classic, you know, alternative indie rock vibe. And I think they're gonna go places. So.
Cool. Yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed probably to find a washboard at Damn Funk's show. So
that's
if that's not your thing, there are options. I guess one more thing I wanted to ask you about. You know, we had a reader ask this question, and I thought it might be kind of revealing in terms of how you guys pick films and how kind of the whole schedule for the True False year goes. She was just asking about, you know, why True False always falls right at the end of February, right at the beginning of March. And I think there is a little bit of strategic placement there, but I'd just be curious for you to talk about like how that works for you guys.
So, I mean, going way back, and our dates have shifted a little bit.
Right,
but,
sure.
But we wanted a date, a time of year. You know, when we started, we were afraid that like nobody would pay attention. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to make sure it wasn't like the weather wasn't too nice.
Sure, yeah.
You know, we wanted like good movie going weather.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we found this moment sort of it's right between you know, winter and spring.
Mm-hmm.
It's before spring break. Depending on how the basketball teams are doing, there may be a sport going on, but there may not be a sport going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
This year's a weird one. Every 4 years, we have to reckon with the both the Olympics on one side and the Oscars.
Right.
We're on Oscar weekend this year.
Yeah.
That's impacted some press and some industry people. It doesn't make a big difference for most people in Columbia.
Sure.
But yeah, we like this time of year. We think most years the weather has been okay.
Sure.
Some years it's not.
Sure.
This year we're tempting fate by having our theme be weather.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, that's really the answer. Is we picked this moment. It has panned out. I will say that it places us at the beginning of the calendar year,
Right.
which is also basically the beginning of the film year.
Right.
So, 10 of our films are coming to True False from Sundance. We'll be their second, maybe third stop.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to have new films, and that's a fun thing. We're also showing films that are almost a year old, so we don't put a big premium on having those early films or those premieres. But we love it when it's fresh, and we love it when our audience can say, like, hey, I saw that first.
Yeah, that's great. Well, obviously True False coming up March 1st through 4th. We are going to start this weekend actually in earnest, kind of rolling out our True False coverage, including we've already talked about Robert Greene's film Bisbee 17, but I have a pretty lengthy feature with him that's going to be, I think, online Friday and in Sunday's Tribune. So please check out True False at their website, truefalse.org. Please check out our coverage at columbiatribune.com. Thanks a lot.